to my home on 381 Tarpon Avenue. I call it Whitewash Alley. It is located in the Boca Grande Historical District. I want to tell you a little bit of the story about this house. I say it's a house, but it's really a home, and it has such a heartbeat that you can feel pumping through all the doors and windows and on this beautiful porch here. A little bit about the beginning of this home. It was built in 1939 by the Barnes brothers, who Carolyn Parkinson Neighbors is a cousin of. It was built in 1939, and Carolyn tells me that it was a Sears and Roebuck house. The house was actually a typical cracker house, shotgun house, that had 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and the front door looked right out the back door. It had a small front porch, 2 bedroom, 2 bath, small living room, and a little galley kitchen, and a small little stoop back porch at that time. The Barnes family lived in it for a while and raised some of their children. And then I'm told that Kingsmore Johnson Sr. Owned the house, and during that time there were quite a few other families that lived in the house. The house was located on Park Avenue originally. It was built on Park Avenue across from the Boca Grande Theater, and where the Boca Grande Health Clinic sits now is where the house was originally from 1939 until 1990. So from what I understand, Kingsmore Johnson bought the house from the Barnes family when they moved away to Tampa. At that point in time, I'm not sure if some of the Johnson family lived in it. I'm not sure if Kingsmore did, but it obviously was a family home for many, and I have lots of names that I want to share with you. These are our founding families of Boca Grande, and that's why I feel like it has a heartbeat, because there's so many stories that this house, I wish it could still talk, but fortunately some of the family members and the children and grandchildren have shared stories with me. The first family that I know for sure that lived in here after the Johnsons was Jerry and Geraldine Fugate, and that's my aunt and uncle. The sea grape tree in the backyard that was on the East Railroad side seems to have many, many memories with all the children that grew up there. Climbing the tree, Park's mother had to call the fire department to have him taken out of the tree at one point. Other stories he tells me of sitting on the front porch of the house and watching people all dressed up going to the movies at the San Marco movie theater. Another favorite story that he shared was that he remembered seeing this boy and girl riding up and down the street on Park Avenue, and he kept wondering about, well, what are they doing? And they were obviously on a date, and that happened to be Carolyn Parkinson and Clyde Neighbors, who later married. Carolyn and Clyde, after they were married, actually moved into the house and lived there for a while themselves, and Carolyn shared with me that Misty was actually born while they moved into the house. So I think we're carrying on the tradition from the Barnes to the Johnsons to the Fugates to the Parkinson Neighbors family. And it's sometime after that the Jack and Edith Silcox family moved into the home, and their daughters Jackie and Becky were raised there for a few years, and they have some great stories. Becky was quite small, but she remembers it, and Jackie remembers it well before they moved over to Tarpon Street themselves. After the Silcoxes moved out, then Don and Marie Hargis moved into this home. Don and Marie had 4 children, Don Jr., Annette, Betsy, and Julie. And Annette shared a few stories with me. Betsy and Julie have also shared stories in the past. One of their fun stories, not again talking about the sea grape tree, how they all climbed it and how they loved it, and they liked to run across the street to the San Marco Theater. But they tell me the story of they're in the bedrooms, the 2 front bedrooms. Their dad had built a little alcove up there, and some of the girls actually slept in that because there were 4 children in a 2-bedroom house. So Don Hargis was a TV repair, electrician, carpenter on the island, as was Jack Silcox, who was a carpenter, fine carpenter for Griffin Builders. So this is a working class household, and it depicts the time from the late 30s to the early 70s that the people in the community lived on Park Avenue. The Hargises eventually moved out. I'm not sure of the year. And they moved on down the street, I believe. They moved down into where Kim Newland's home is now, across from the Island School. But then later on, Mrs. Jane Ahe bought the home. And she was a great lady. She did some changes to the house. She added a back bedroom den to the property. That was the first time that there was a major addition made to the house. And it did have awning windows, and it was a den. And Jane actually was a Boy Scout, Cub Scout leader, and she held crafting classes, shell classes, Boy Scout meetings, cooked spaghetti dinners, and had a lot of boys roaming around in that house. So I think the boys, from a few of them that I talked to, the sea grape tree is still the most important thing. One of the things I left out about the house, not only did Park Fugate tell me, but Annette Hargis told me about, as I mentioned a while ago, it was right behind the train track. So the train track runs down East Railroad, and the house was on the other side of the alley road there on Park. But when the train would go by, all the dishes in the house would just shake and rattle. The whole house would shake. The fire department was on East Railroad, and one of the things that Park remembered about the fire department, when the fire siren would go off, he was hoping that it would be so loud that it would scare Mrs. Agnes Wheeler's cats to death. Because Mrs. Wheeler had numerous cats that she fed, and they were all over the neighborhood. So, and they were all back in that alley. There were so many great stories that were shared about this house and how much love that they felt there. And I just feel like that there's such a great heart here. And even when Mrs. Ahe, who was not raised in Boca Grande, moved here, she took the Island Boys with the Boy Scout troops and shared her home with them. At some point in time, when she sold the home to the Boca Grande Health Clinic, and I believe it was in the late 80s, early 80s, not sure when it was, but at that point when the health clinic bought it, they had their director of the clinic, Jan Busby, and her family. So Rick, Jan Busby, Scott, and Kristen moved into the house there. And they spent quite a bit of time in that home, and they have lots of shared memories. And it was just a little hub center in town. Come 1989, and Boca Grande Health Clinic decided they were going to expand, and they wanted to move to that property. They had another lot right next to it that they were going to build a new health clinic. Well, what happened was, because of the historical district, they could not tear the house down. They had to move it into one of the historical areas on the island. And they also needed to find an island family to have the house that had property that was willing to take on the adventure. And that was me. So now comes late 1989, probably around May or June, and Dr. Hank Wright approached me, and Mr. Stan Donnelly, who was the president of the clinic at that time, and said, "Betsy, we really want you to think about taking this house. And you have the property on Tarpon Avenue, we know that, and you've been a volunteer for the clinic for years, and we really think that you are deserving of this house." Well, I was pretty much blown away, but it did work out, and it was a long process. And my property, so a little bit about this property here on Tarpon Avenue right now, before I get into the moving of the house. This property belonged to my grandfather, Jerome Fugate Sr., and I believe he purchased the property around 1926. This area of town was platted by the Boca Grande Land Company back in the early 1900s. And from what we can find on the records, Granddaddy purchased the property in 1926. Well, there was nothing on this property. It was 2 lots, 100 by 100, and he planted key lime trees on it. She was well known for the key lime trees. And also, in this area of town, there's a small river that runs underneath um, the ground, and it's a water flowing river. So this was where they put the pump station to pump water to the Pink Elephant that was being built in 1947 down on Bayou Drive. In the 80s, my father, Delmar Fugate, he had inherited the property from his father and mother, and he deeded the property to me and my family. And it was a joyous day indeed. So Dr. Wright did know that I had the property and that it would be a good project for me. And I can never think he had stand on enough for that. So for 30 years, I've lived, and my family has breathed and lived 6 generations in this home. We came in 1990, but it took us a while because 89, like August of 89 until January of 90, I had this wonderful crew that worked on this home when it was on Park Avenue. We were out on a wing and a prayer, and let me tell you what, there were a lot of prayers. Bob Stevens, who had Gasparilla Construction at that time, took it by faith, said, Betsy, I think we can do this project. We researched, we looked into it. He got a hold of Harold Bowes Tractor Company and his great crew, and James Johnson, Johnson Pile Drivers, and they said, we'll take on this adventure. And in order to move a house anywhere, but especially in Boca Grande, with all the little nooks and crannies and things that go on, it was quite an ordeal. They had to move trees, they had to board up the house, they took the front porch and the back porch off of it. The whole community was behind it. We were all so excited about this move. We had this lot cleared, and the morning in January 1990 was a foggy, gray morning. The whole community was out before daylight watching this move, and it was quite an adventure to see our house moving down Park Avenue. I'm not exactly sure how many hours it took. I think it was probably about 5 or 6 hours that it took. You have to have Florida Power and Light involved, you have to have the telephone company involved, you have to have cable involved, plus the sheriff's department and the fire department and everybody available. So it was quite a scene in Boca Grande, and it was very, very exciting. And I decided about that time that I was going to name the house Whitewash Alley, because when I was growing up, that's what the name of the street was. And it was named Whitewash Alley. There's two stories about it. One was because it was a dirt road, and it was kind of white sand shell looking. And the other one was that most of the houses on the block were built by the railroad, and they all brought in whitewash, and all the houses were whitewashed. Facing Tarpon, but leaving a lot of space over on the